human nature is complex and it's nuanced and it's flawed. And so on one end of the spectrum, we are seeing lots of wonderful things like compassion and altruism and care. On the other end of the spectrum, we're also seeing things like greed and selfishness and competitiveness. So when we think about what could potentially lie ahead, we have to think about the lessons that this is teaching us in terms of our own nature and what that means for the systems that we design going forward and the kind of reality that we bring about. How do we design in such a way that we are minimizing harm and minimizing the worst aspects of ourselves, so that we, in the face of future crises, are able to respond with the more positive versions of ourselves. We are seeing some examples of positive signals emerge and some examples of transformation taking place as well. So for instance, Amsterdam is piloting donut economics, which is, an economic model that takes the environment and all the ways the environment could potentially degrade into account. And we're seeing similar sort of solutions come up in South Korea, where they're thinking about how to use the recovery around COVID-19 to create a more sustainable, more green-oriented society. And in Canada, we're seeing, the very first seeds of universal basic income with the relief packages that were issued by the government for people. We saw Canada respond in a way that supported individuals and small businesses and not corporations. So that sort of sharing and that sort of collaboration is going to be necessary going forward, especially because we now have to recognize that we really are all in this together, and problems like COVID-19 don't respect our artificial boundaries that we've set up between countries. As the world goes into lockdown and we are forced to reevaluate our lives, I think it forces all of us to think about what values we have as individuals and the values that we want our society to have. So in terms of the values that we should espouse going forward, we need to think about views that are much more compassionate, that are inclusive, that are oriented towards taking care of our communities, and that includes values that are built on life-centric principles and on respect and so on and so forth. And so if we can start to think about the kind of values that we want and think about how we embody those values, then we can think about what it is that society should embody as well and start to move in that direction to bring about the values that we want for everyone. This crisis has really shown us the importance of acknowledging and listening to science, for having respect for the scientific community, for having respect for academia and real experts and the value that they bring to the issues that we're facing. It's something that is going to have to be incorporated into policy much more deeply than it is right now. One of the things we need to acknowledge is that there is a bit of a disconnect between the issues that science deals with and the way we govern ourselves. So for instance, if we think about COVID-19 and the implications it's going to have implications for years to come. So there are fallouts from this that we're going to see many, many years from now that we need to think about, and think about the implications of now as well. But the same goes for issues like climate change. So climate change is an issue that will take its toll over many decades, potentially. And so that long-term time horizon where these critical issues are playing out is very disconnected from our short-term mentality around politics. And so this short-term approach to governance is, again, disconnected to these long-term issues that we're facing. And now we're going to potentially have to think about how do we reconcile the two, and how do we ensure that these bigger, deeper issues are being addressed in a way that isn't subject to things like politicking and egos and so on and so forth. So we need to think about how our reality is different from other people's reality, and how do we reconcile that? How do we find ways to alleviate the pressures that others are experiencing so that we can better design with them and allow them to have a voice and empower them to co-design futures together? COVID-19 has revealed why it's so important for us to develop futures thinking and systems thinking as capacities throughout our society. So it's something that needs to be integrated into every organization, and probably something we should be teaching at a young age. So futures thinking includes strategic foresight, which at its very core is about how we think about the many ways in which the world could evolve. So the multiple alternative futures that are possible for us. And once we understand the many ways in which the world could evolve, then we start to think about the implications that those consequences and those worlds have on us in the present day. Then we can start to think about what it means for us to respond to those futures and how we set ourselves up now. At a very fundamental level, systems thinking is about the complex nature of our world, but thinking about how the whole is made up of parts and how those parts impact and influence each other. And so both systems thinking and futures thinking are really important for future crises, because we want to be able to think about the crisis before it happens, but we also want to think about how we can set up ourselves, our society, in a way where we're flourishing, where we're able to mitigate the crisis before it happens rather than react in a post-traumatic way, where we're dealing with the issue once the problem has already occurred. So the world that somebody, born 25 years from now or 50 years from now or 100 years from now, the worlds that they're born into are going to be so different from ours. We've seen just over the past few months just how much our world can change and how quickly it can change when something unexpected happens. And so if that's the case, if our world can change so quickly and our world can be disrupted and is constantly evolving, then accounting for future generations and the worlds that they're going to be facing can better inform the decisions that we're making right now and change the decisions that we're making right now, so that we're making decisions in a way that allows future generations to be better off than we are, and allows our collective future to, again, allow for more possibilities and more positive possibilities than we're allowing ourselves now. We are going to face things like a mental health epidemic. We need to be particularly mindful of the trauma that our medical community and our frontline workers have experienced. We also need to think about all of the lessons that we're seeing emerge right now around what is essential, what is important to society, how society functions, so that we can capture those changes and continue to build on them later. Other changes that we could potentially see is, shifts in international relations, shifts in power. So I've said before that I think power has already shifted east, and we're just going to be seeing the implications of that play out over many decades. How is that going to shape our everyday lives? That's a big question right now. So a lot of changes are in store, but the good thing is that you have the ability to contribute to those changes. We need to start thinking very consciously of that. And so the thing that I've been doing is I've been questioning, is my behavior, the values that I have, the way I am in the world aligned with the future I want? And how do I make changes in my present day life to align with that emerging reality that I would hope to see for everyone?